Welcome to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. Each week, Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Londy explore the moments, questions, and ideas that shape who we are and who we aspire to be. And now for this week's conversation.
Welcome back to In Such a Time, Rabbi Londy. It's lovely to sit with you today. And I think what we're going to try to do today, if possible, is use this podcast to explore some of the internal discussions that we have at the synagogue that maybe it's nice to share with some of our congregants, get some of the thoughts and weigh in on our thought process overall. And so there's a couple things that have been coming up recently that are really attached to a general theme. And I asked us to talk about this because I think it's something our congregants would be interested in hearing. And I think the theme of these different issues, and we can mention them specifically, but the general theme is to what degree should we as the synagogue clergy team be trying to uphold standards that we think are the correct things to do versus to what degree should we try to meet congregants where they're at and to serve their needs? And what is the push-pull relationship like between the standards of the clergy and the practices of the congregants when those do not completely line up? So before we jump in, any thoughts about that, or do you want me to jump into our examples?
I think it's a really important discussion that we're going to have today because it is something, I think we're going to maybe reveal something a little bit personal about our own hashkafa, like our own way of looking at Jewish law and Jewish tradition. And I think that maybe there is a gap between our personal standards and the community standards, which I think is worth exploring.
I think that there is an assumption that for many of us clergy, that the synagogue that we serve does not necessarily look like exactly like the synagogue that we ourselves would attend if given the choice. Right?
That's a very taboo thing to admit out loud, but I think that there's truth there.
Right. I think that I'll give an example here that at my over Passover, we did Seder down in Maryland because we brought Seder to our daughter in college there. And as a consequence, there was just the four of us having Seder together in a small Airbnb. And on one hand, it was kind of sad to have a small Seder. On the other hand, our family did Seder exactly the way that we want to do it. And sometimes when we have guests to our Seder, we have to ask ourselves the question of, well, what things do we want to kind of water down or take out?
Yeah.
We don't want to make it too long. We don't want to bore people. We don't want to confuse people who won't understand and know the context. And here we got to run the Seder exactly how we wanted to. And it was long and it had lots of the observance in Hebrew, but us had lots of the music and discussion. It was our Seder. And I feel like for we clergy members that we are often in the same dynamic of wanting to do things the way exactly we want to, but being mindful of the fact that some of our congregants they have different practices themselves. They often come from just not knowing as much the background in order to fully participate the way that we do. And so there's this dance that we do, a negotiation between doing things exactly how we want to and how the congregants will feel most uplifted.
I was speaking to a modern Orthodox colleague about this when they were telling me about their communal observance and how they always have to be present, always have to be on throughout Shabbat. And they were saying that positively, but also the burden of it. And I was saying, it's a very different experience for me. Sometimes I have a longing for a certain kind of Jewish communal experience, but on the other hand, I have lots of time to get to explore that because it's a different kind of Shabbat commitment. And I wasn't saying that with judgment either way. And they said to me, you have the opportunity to do shlichut. You have the opportunity to see yourself with a mission in the Jewish world.
Yeah.
And you serve the Jewish world. And what a privilege to get to do that kind of shlichut. And it really kind of helped reset my mind and my feelings about it, because that's certainly true. We're here in our role because it's a wonderful job and it's a great profession, but also as a sense of duty to the Jewish people. And I think about that a lot in terms of the decisions that I make as a rabbi, as a Jew, as my own human being. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I've used the analogy before in other podcasts about going to the Pearl Jam concert and having them basically play all of the songs that they wanted to hear and none that the fans wanted to hear.
Yeah.
I feel like there has to be that dynamic where if we do things exactly the way we want to internally, then people will feel left out and they won't feel as though we're really caring for their needs.
On the other hand, I think that sometimes people look towards the synagogue to set the standard. And if
100%.
we're not
Yeah.
setting the standard and if we're not doing it by the book or by a book, then who's going to do that for us?
Right.
I'll give an example. Um, we decided as a community that we're going to change our Kashrut observance. We are not a strictly kosher institution, but we now don't mix milk and meat at meals. Like our kitchen is not kosher, but there's no meat and dairy served together.
Including no chicken and dairy.
No chicken
but for our congregants listening, fish is not considered meat within Jewish parlance.
And so that decision was made, and there was discussion about it. Do people really want that? Is that something that's going to be, putting too many of our own values on the community? Are people going to meet us where they are? And I remember the discussion that we had with people was, no, like we expect the synagogue to have a higher standard of Judaism than we do. We look towards the synagogue, we look towards the clergy to.
Some did. Some said.
Some did. Some said, well, I really actually don't want a community a Reform Jewish community that observes Kashrut. That's kind of offensive to me, which was an interesting and I thought very thoughtful comment. So I think that throughout the past years, especially after October 7th, in some ways, where there's more of a desire to go back to a more traditional form of Judaism as a way to preserve the core of our Jewish identity, I think people maybe are even more open to not necessarily more stringency, but a greater depth.
Yeah, I think so. And I love that example. Let's turn to another one of the examples that came up, and I just mentioned Passover with my family. And I recently I put out there a rather crazy idea around Passover, and it hit with different. It was responded to differently with different members of our team. So it came from two observations. Observation number one is.
Wait, what are we doing for Passover?
I'm going to come to the observations first. I'm going to say then what was the solution I was
okay, go.
So observation one is that I have a feeling that for many of our congregants, there is not a great sense of exactly how to lead a Seder. And I think that for a wide swath of our congregation, the Seder that they do is rather short in terms of what's actually brought out of the Haggadah. Maybe it's just the foods that are eaten. Maybe it's a 10-minute with the singing of the Manishtanah 4 questions, but that there is a general lack of authority when it comes to leading the Seder and not knowing what to do and feeling a bit embarrassed about that. And then the observation number two was that given that Passover often falls during a school vacation, as it did this year and as it will next year, a lot of our families are spending that time traveling. And when they are traveling abroad, that often means that they are not only are they not observing Passover, but that they're not even having a Passover Seder. And so I put out the idea of perhaps we should have a Passover Seder the week before Passover. And that would have two goals in mind. Goal number one would be to help to teach people who are leading Seders step by step exactly what goes into a Seder. But number two, to tell people that if they're not observing Passover and they're not having a Passover Seder during Passover, we will at least give them a Passover experience, although it's not happening during Passover. And that prompts a ton of questions around, are we basically giving our congregants an opt-out and condoning the behavior of not observing the holiday, especially during the holiday? Yeah. Are we helping this, what we would say is behavior that we would like to change? Or what I was trying to say is better to have Passover Seder early than not at all. And so this was a perfect example of, do we hold our standards, and is it supposed to we debase ourselves in our minds that we are going to be having Passover Seder before Passover? Or do we take a deep breath and say, at least we're giving the people, like, we are taking what they're currently doing and lifting it up a little bit. So thoughts?
This is very loaded for me because I was the naysayer. I was the
You were not the unique naysayer, and I want to say that I was the one prompting the question. I don't think I was the real death in terms of, pushing this absolutely has to go through. I was I
okay.
was I was seeking your and others' advice.
So I think that part of what modern Judaism does, modern liberal Judaism, modern Reform Judaism does, is it says we can have the outer shell of Judaism without any of the contents inside.
Mhm.
And I don't think that makes any sense. Judaism lives according to a certain period of time. We live according to a calendar. We have certain customs. We have certain things that have held us together throughout the generations. Those have been absolutes that have been non-negotiable. There's a lot of things that have always been negotiable, and those have not been things that are negotiable. And the suggestion to have a Seder to kind of be able to like check off the box of like, oh, I had a Passover-esque experience this year, not on the date of Passover, was really kind of shocking to me.
Mhm.
I'm not going to say abhorrent. It's not abhorrent. It's shocking to me because Passover is about commemorating a specific date.
Mhm.
And once you remove the time commitment,
Yeah.
then it could just be any other date. You can't just create, you could say this time is sanctified because I sanctify this time, but then you're losing the element of being in conversation with the rest of the Jewish people around the world. That's part of the power in it. And so when you reframed it as, okay, this is going to be a model Seder, then that was more palatable to me because I think it's wonderful for people to learn how to do it. And if people want to take from that, well, I had a Seder this year, that's wonderful. They can do whatever they want. But as a person who is seen as someone who sets community standards, that was a deviation of the standard that doesn't feel comfortable for me because I do feel like a time-bound Jew. For instance, in our community, when we celebrate holidays when it's not the holiday, and I think we've kind of changed that a little bit over the past few years, that is a little bit uncomfortable for me. What are
Let's
we
explain
doing?
that. Why do we do that sometimes?
Okay, so and this is I think like the essence of the debate. Sometimes we'll observe a holiday on Shabbat or on the time that we know that there's going to be people at the synagogue because we know that people are not necessarily going to come in and take time off or not going to work on a chag, on a festival.
Or even on a weekday night. And maybe Simchat Torah falls on a Monday night, but it's better for us to hold it on a Saturday or Sunday because people will show up for it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Coming from Israel, where the calendar is the Jewish calendar,
Yes.
that was, I think, the thing that was hardest for me when coming here. That what do you and I knew that because I grew up
Yeah.
in America, but I forgot that people are living their lives and the Jewish calendar, the Jewish time is not necessarily the most important defining element in their life.
Yeah. No, I think you explained it very well in the way that you talk about it. It reminds me that in the early 20th century and late 19th century, there were sort of at the zenith of high church reform
Yeah.
movement. There were synagogues that moved Shabbat to Sunday. And
Especially
they
in
did
Hungary.
so, right? They did so in order to be in step with their Christian neighbors.
Yeah.
And if it's 1 out of 7 days is the Sabbath, why not still 1 of 7 days? Why does it have to be Friday night until Saturday night? And after all, if you're living in Israel, where people often now take off Friday and Saturday, it's the second of the 2 days, which is the Shabbat. So in America, it's still the second of the 2 days that you take off for the weekend. So it's somewhat equivalent. That's a modern way of looking at it. And you say that to me, I feel it's abhorrent. The idea of moving Shabbat off of Saturday feels like an absolute betrayal of everything I know to be true in Judaism, and the idea of having the date on the date, that Friday night is Shabbat dinner, is Erev Shabbat, that's and Saturday is Shabbat. And I understand the incongruity of saying, and on one hand, that is a anathema to everything that I stand for. On the other hand, proposing a Passover Seder a week before Passover, and I guess I wouldn't have even promoted it or thought of it if not for flipping through my social media and seeing, and no offense to congregants listening, but picture of congregant after congregant enjoying their baguette at the Paris, farmer's market over Shabbat.
Or in Tokyo or wherever they are. Yeah,
well,
it's
Tokyo
wonderful.
can eat rice. It's Sephardic. It's fine. Knowing that each year a large group of our 11th graders, 10th graders go on this Spain trip with the local high school and stay at home families and have no Passover Seder and have no Passover observance. And when my daughter went on that same trip, she was the only kid that brought a box of matzah with her and tried to find other kids to do a Passover Seder with her, but no one was either interested or felt able that they could be able to pull that together. And so it's this feeling of need. And it's funny, it speaks to actually the very roots of Reform Judaism. When Reform Judaism first arose, it wasn't the feeling that, oh, this was this great idea in a vacuum. It was that people aren't doing Judaism at all. They are leaving Judaism for ethical culture, ethical society. Yeah. We need to give them a compromised position where they can retain their Judaism, but still act in a modern way and no longer feel beholden to Jewish practices and norms of mitzvot. And I think that that's something we even talk about today and ask about whether or not that was there was much good that came out of it, but also a lot of problems. And so we here at the synagogue have to figure out on our own microcosm of our community, to what degree are we the pastor, and to what degree, right, are we the prophet? Do we try to tell people that they're okay and to serve the needs where they are, or as you hear me say at the synagogue all the time, fish where the fish are, or is it our job to model the standards and to challenge our congregants to do more?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and I'm always of the belief that we should challenge. I think people want to be challenged. I think that we're in a community where people are so brilliant and committed to all huge things in their lives, and Jewish identity is such a huge part of it. And I think that every time we do challenge, people meet the challenge, and are seeking that and are thirsty for that. And so when I'm going to say raise and lower the standards, not in a judgmental way, just as a measurement way. When we lower the standards of the entrance into Jewish practice, I think that we're doing a disservice to the future of the Jewish people, in a very, very serious way. And I think that if we raise our community, if we guide our community to being Jews who follow practices with accordance to other Jewish communities, I think that they'll see themselves as part of a greater people, which I think is so much part of the mission of what we do. And I never want to put our community in a position where they are deviating from that standard, which would, I think, take away from peoplehood, which would take away from their sense of like being part of a bigger project that is the Jewish people, that has been around for thousands of years, that has survived because of strict adherence to these rules. And so I'd feel so uncomfortable and maybe even arrogant thinking that I can be a proponent of changing what Jewish history has always been.
I find it interesting to hear a female rabbi make the claim that we should not change tradition or traditional norms.
No, I didn't say we don't change traditional norms. I'm saying something very different.
Thank goodness we changed those norms for female rabbis now.
I'm saying the Jewish tradition was always upheld a Jewish calendar. The calendar was at the core of everything that we do. Changing the calendar is changing the rule of law. It's changing what the practice is. It's changing what the tradition is. And yeah, of course I'm here. I'm a Reform female rabbi. It sounds better coming from me than from you.
I didn't mean it in any sort of negative sense here. Well,
you said it like in a challenging sense. Yeah. Like I understand, but there are certain things that I can do the math for, and there's other formulas that don't really equate so well in my head.
I want to be certain the proposal here is not to change when Passover is observed writ large. It's to say that there is a certain time for it and you're not doing it. And so here's a chance for you to do something. If I can, let's turn to the second example, because it's one that's less about observance and calendar and more just about, I guess, spiritual norms.
Okay.
So another thing that we talk about very often here is how do we lead our services at the synagogue? And there's a propensity, especially when there are services featuring our kids, and that is our religious school grade level Shabbatot once a month, or our Tat Shabbat that are also once a month with our preschool families, and that we have kids come up and speak and help lead parts of the service. And inevitably, parents, grandparents, family, friends love to bring their phones, love to even stand in the aisles and to take pictures and to film their kids speaking and leading parts of the service in a way that makes it feel much less like a prayerful experience and more like a elementary school assembly.
Yeah.
And on one hand, we could tell them, please don't, please, we want you to honor the sanctity of this moment and to please refrain from using your phone to take pictures during the service, as we do on Shabbat morning. On the other hand, it is the joy and honor of every Safta and Saba that shows up here to capture that perfect moment when little Shmuel is reading his section on the Bima and to post it on social media and say what a wonderful place Temple Bethel is that nurtures this love of Judaism in their children. And so, to what degree should we be cracking down on this behavior of taking pictures, basically treating tefillah much more like a school assembly than as a spiritual endeavor? What do you think?
You're asking the wrong person, because for a long time when there was like a Tat Shabbat situation, I'd always opt in taking my kids to the regular service because I believe actually pretty intensely that all Shabbat, all tefillah is a place for children. It's a place for all ages. Like that is my
Yes.
personal belief system, that any prayer time is for all ages,
Yes.
always. And there's not like a kid's time and an adult time.
And that's a very traditional view that when you go to, let's say, an Orthodox synagogue, there are kids running all around, there are people coming in and out. There's no such thing in the traditional world as a kid service as designated that this is specifically for you.
Yeah. So inherently, like the nature of the structure of it is not, it's not my go-to. On the other hand, I'm quite aware that most people don't want to bring their children to a 7:30 service and they're afraid of them acting out and all the things that I read.
Late, yeah.
It's too late and they need to eat all the things, everything. And then if they're there, I reassure them that whatever their kid is doing is fine. And what are the boundaries of that? But it's interesting because I'm with you here. I know that I observe differently than how other people observe. Like I don't want to take my phone out in a service. I want to be present in service. On the other hand, if my kid was on the Bima doing something super cute and it was Jewish and I'm trying to create Jewish memories and I'm trying to, instill in my child that Judaism is important and they get up and do something so beautiful and so profound, I understand the reason to capture that. My issue, I think that we can say cameras don't belong in a service and this is a sacred space and we can be present. I also understand the other side of it. My issue, more than anything, is when the cameras and the phones and the talking make the kedusha of the moment, the holiness of the moment, feel when it's taken away, when it's made to feel less than what it is. When people are just being silly and not really respecting the place, because even a children's service can be so grounding and rooted and beautiful and powerful. And I think that there's a fine line between how do we allow people to just enjoy it in the way that they want to enjoy it, which today is capturing it, and saying, no, like we're going to create a moment in time and we're going to all be present for it.
And as well said, I want to say two things in response. One is the passive experience that you're bringing up here. The parlance that I often use here in our synagogue is to call it a Chuck E. Cheese experience.
Yeah.
And that there are times when we as the clergy can be meant to feel like, this is a very Gen X term here, like the Chuck E. Cheese animatronic band that plays in the background while kids run around and play video games and eat pizza and have birthday parties, as perhaps. And do you ever go to a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese growing up? Come on, in Orlando, I had to.
Did. Of course I did.
Very good.
Grossest pizza in the entire world.
So that's one piece is it can feel spiritually empty to lead a Chuck E. Cheese-like experience in which we are the background entertainment, in which the talking and the camera, and it's just as long as we're playing the music and keep on going, we are the piano man at that moment, and that can feel just make you feel very distant. say you began your comments by saying that you're the wrong person to ask about this because of your feelings of Tot Shabbat versus general Shabbat community. I'm also the wrong person to ask about this, but for a totally different reason, which is that I never film anything. And I ever go to all of these experiences in my life and I look around at people and say, what are you doing? You go to a concert and people
I
aren't
know.
enjoying the concert. Are you really going to go home? And are you really going to go watch, the whole concert's on YouTube anyway. Like, why are you doing this? You go to all of these different, whatever, presentations, events, tours, etc., and people are filming the whole time. And I don't get it because I personally would never go home and watch it again. I really want to be there in the experience. That's
Mm.
my own thing that's completely separate from this. Um, I, I don't know how we manage the careful balance between making it not a Chuck E. Cheese experience, but also allowing the people to enjoy the moment the way that they tend to enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
And one thing that we've done here at the synagogue, which can seem rather oxymoronic, is that at tot services and at grade level Shabbat, we allow them to do this, to film and to sometimes come out and walk down into the aisle and be like gesturing at their kids to smile and in a very interruptive way. Whereas at the 7:30 main service, and certainly on Shabbat mornings, we ask people to please put their phones away. And on Shabbat mornings and Shabbat and B'nai Mitzvah in the afternoon, I give a whole talk about honoring the sanctity of the service because there's something to be about becoming a B'nai Mitzvah when you anyway have a live stream and usually you have a photographer in the background. You don't need that clip just then. And I will tell you, even though I say this and I give an announcement to please refrain from using your cell phone from taking pictures or videos during the service at the beginning of every B'nai Mitzvah service, inevitably, the family members don't even listen to me. And they often will, I have to stop the service and tell the grandma to please, as you mentioned, put away the phone. Or there's a recent time we had a B'nai Mitzvah and, inevitably an hour after the service, pictures taken by the parents during the service pop up on social media because they're so proud of their kid and they can't hear what I'm saying, or
What
for
you
them
did.
it's a bridge too far. It's already done. It's up by then. I have spoken to some families and said to them, look, can you please take it down from social media? I don't want to create the expectation that's something that people do, or people say, well, they got to post their kid. Um, but it's a real push and pull because at the end of the day, we are both um, I'm thinking of the word the mashgiach ruchani of the congregation of setting the correct spiritual
Yeah.
direction. The other half, we are stewards of a nonprofit organization which depends upon very generous individuals in order to devote significant amount of money and time towards sustaining the place. And in that moment, this is what creates happiness and fulfillment for them.
So I think that that's also about what is the mission statement of the community. And there's some communities that put like creating spiritual space and sacred moments as top. And I I don't remember what the wording is for us, but I know that creating joy and a sense of commitment to this community is perhaps above everything else. And so I think that there has to just be an alignment about what is it that we're trying to accomplish, and based on that, are we accomplishing it?
I think that our statement, even having looked at it does prioritize the spiritual experience. It's not one that explicitly talks about joy having a first priority. And I think that some parts of Judaism, by the way, are inherently sad and should be. Um, I think that you can look not just at the Reform movement and not even just as Judaism, but at religious practice overall, that there has been a sharp movement towards accessibility and approachability and making it not be the clergy person up on high, but having someone who is relatable and affable.
Yeah.
And that when that happens, there's also, it's not a position that where respect is the top priority,
Yeah.
where now the rabbi, the pastor is my friend
Yeah.
is differently than, the rabbi is the voice of God up on the bima on high. And I think that that's part and parcel of the issues that we deal with.
I agree. I think that that kind of is that trickles into everything in society at the moment. There is definitely like
A lack of authority.
power dynamic issues. Absolutely.
And I think within the synagogue world, by making the synagogue more approachable, I think that there's been more positive than negative that's come out of that. I'll take that any day versus when you hear about how some of our parents, grandparents grew up in their synagogues, in which the synagogue was a rather cold, rather, unwelcoming place in order to just to endure and to become bar bat mitzvah and then to never go in again. I think that there's a real trade-off, but I think there are clearly the drawbacks that we mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wonder if our community would partake in a spiritual assessment to understand what people are seeking. Because right now, sometimes I feel that we function, and it's something that I like, and a lot of the work that I've done rabbinically has been in this model, that it's in some ways it's like a community center. Not that it doesn't have
Intention, yes.
religious grounding, but I'm wondering if people are interested and don't know to ask that, or don't know even that they're looking for that, something that's more grounding spiritually. I mean, people live very, very full lives, and I understand that, daily worship and weekend worship is not necessarily a part of the prioritization of what they want to do, but we do offer a lot of other very serious Jewish content where people show up for it. And so I'm curious, what are people looking for to kind of deepen their lives and the meaning in their lives? I don't know, if
Yeah.
looking out to you guys, I would be really happy for your feedback about that.
I think that our people who come to Bethel, number one, have community in mind
Yeah.
above anything else. And I think that we do act as a community center along with a religious center. And that when you look at how we observe things, we often talk about what are the community building experiences. I'll give you very recent examples that when we were recording this last week for Passover, we had a Mimuna Sephardic Moroccan celebration with Moroccan food and even with a dancer. We're recording this on Yom Ha'atzmaut, and tonight we're going to be having a speaker as well, and serving Ethiopian food and someone from the Ethiopian Israeli community. These are cultural events, and we know that something that works really well with our community is having really tasty food and having people come sit together at tables and catch up with each other on their lives.
Together.
That is a big function of being a central hub where people get to know one another and build up relationships. And that's something that we do very well.
Yeah.
I think that we're talking about specifically issues of observance. And observance is often not the top priority of our congregants. And I think that we're talking about instances in which observance sometimes butts up against that communal inclusion of come one, come all, and come as you are. I think that that's a distillation of what we're talking about.
Well, I mean, I've made the claim, and a lot of a lot of the classes that I teach kind of come back to this, is that we could do all the same things that we're doing, but within the Jewish framework and within the Jewish context. And
Yes.
like, I think that is the special sauce of.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Like, okay, so we are doing Yom Ha'atzmaut on Yom Ha'atzmaut tonight.
Yes.
That is amazing. That is so exciting.
Yes.
We did Mimuna after Passover. So exciting.
Yes. It wasn't the right date.
Wasn't the right date, but okay, you can always get your flower back.
Oh. So now you're switching up again on me. Go ahead.
I'm very inconsistent.
Okay.
I've never claimed to be consistent.
But Mimuna is a cultural, non-halachic celebration. It's not like Passover, which is the calendar and is written in the Torah.
What I'm saying is that, when we really lean into the Jewish experience during the Jewish experience times, not always, but often, it's very, very positive.
Yeah.
And I remember right after October 7th, we did this. I was really pushing for a potluck. I just come from Israel, and I was like, Jen is our executive director, Rabbi Jaffe. I've got this great idea. We're doing a potluck. And you guys were like, good luck. And people came because people wanted to have Shabbat dinner together.
They did.
I believe that the core principles of Judaism that have been unifying for us are things that people are inherently seeking to feel connected in their own lives.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. If we have the opportunity to align the things that we want to do within the Jewish framework, let's try to do that. And I'm also always open to creativity, because I agree, you do have to meet people where they are. But you also have to say, but these are the standards that have held the Jewish people together, and we're not just individuals. We're a bigger collective, and that's part of what makes us special.
I think that again articulates the dilemma exactly correctly, and I think that this is a good time. Maybe we can turn it over to the congregants and say we'd love to hear from you, and on the specific balance of to what degree are you looking to the synagogue to maintain and model standards, or to what degree should we be prioritizing inclusivity and making it as approachable as possible for congregants, especially for things that they find meaningful to them, even if it means taking pictures of their kids in the middle of services. So please, we're asking you guys to write to us. Let us know what you think. Maybe we'll share it at the next episode of this as well, because this is clearly something that we are considering internally and would love to get your feedback on as well. Okay. Thanks, Rabbi. Happy Yom Ha'atzmaut to you.
You too.
Thanks for joining us on In Such a Time. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Londy, or to connect with Temple Bethel of Northern Westchester, visit bethelnw.org, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Temple Bethel NW. Thanks for listening.